It is wonderful to be sharing with you today, and I want to talk about something that I've been asked about a lot as a pastor. But before we go there, I've kind of themed the music that I want to share around that topic. We're talking about a God who can do anything. There's nothing that he can't do. I want to share a song with my sister that I'm so glad to have with me, and I'll introduce in a minute, but you've heard me talk about her many times. This is a song our mother sang. You know, she had kind of a list of songs that were her go-to songs, and we can get together and not only call them out, but sing them, because we've heard them so many times, like Touching Jesus and Tears Will Never Stain the Streets of That City until the storm passes by. And this is another one that she did that we loved. It's an old Dottie Rambo song, and she wrote some beautiful songs. But we want to share this song that's messages, again, in keeping with the message today. There's nothing my God can't do.
He measured the sea in the span of his hands. The mountains were placed at his command.
At the sound of his voice, the sun came shining through. And there's nothing, no nothing that my God can't do. There's nothing, no nothing, there's nothing that my God can't do. Miracles and wonders, there's nothing, no nothing that my God can't do.
He named every star, then he hung them on high. The moon spread its light across God's big sky.
And that same mighty God can take a heart made of stone. He can wash it, then cleanse it, and he can make it his own. There's nothing, no nothing, there's nothing that my God can't do. Miracles and wonders, there's nothing, no nothing that my God can't do.
As I mentioned earlier, I'm so glad to have my sister, my baby sister Connie, with me. Constance is what I called her. I think it's a beautiful name, but she has a ministry all her own. Her and her husband Tim have been ministering in music and in sharing the word through preaching and teaching, and have even traveled with a group of young people, training them for ministry. And so they've kind of tasted just about every field of ministry that you can imagine, and God has used them in a mighty way in all of them. and they're home here in North Carolina, which is funny because when I lived in North Carolina, they were all over the place. But now that I'm not back in North Carolina, they are. But it's always good to see them, and I'm so proud of her. She's the singer of the family, and we love to hear her sing. And again, such a gifted family. Tori and Anna and Harry, their children, and her husband Tim, an amazing musician. So I'm glad to have her here today. And I've asked her to share a word of testimony, and then I'm going to ask her to sing a chorus also before I share a message.
Well, it's wonderful to be with my brother. That doesn't happen very often. So anytime we get that opportunity, we take advantage of it. When he told me that he was talking about what God can do, and how he can do anything. We serve a God that can do anything. I immediately went to what God has done in our family, in things that he has, what we always say, he showed up for, and he was there in prayer and praise time, and he was there when we needed him the most. And I think about 9 years ago, it was right around this time, that my oldest daughter, Tori, we were finishing up a VBS at a church we were at, and we had noticed that she was losing weight. Which wasn't uncommon for a 19-year-old girl. She was trying to watch what she was eating and things like that, and so she was losing weight. And we went through this VBS, and she was in charge of all of the dance and the choreographing for the kids. And so as she was doing the dance and doing all those things, she would come home so winded and so tired, but we just thought it was from being a part of VBS. Towards the end of that week, she decided she was going to sleep on the couch one night, and I was laying in the bed, and I heard something. I heard this noise, and I got up from the bed, and I began to walk towards the den of the house that we were living in, and it was her. It was her breathing, and I had never heard that sound before come out of somebody that was breathing. And so me and my husband thought, she's got pneumonia. That's what it is. It's pneumonia. We need to get her to the doctor. So the next morning we got up, and we made our way to the urgent treatment center there in Wilson. And we didn't even see a doctor. We signed her name in, and we took a seat, and one of the nurses came out from the back and asked to see us. And we walked back there, and she said, "You're going to need to go to the emergency room. We can't see her here." And I said, "Why?" She said, "I can't say for certain, but you need to go to the emergency room." So we went to the emergency room, and we signed her in, and we waited, and they called her name, and she was 19. And because of her age, I couldn't go back with her until they had seen her, and she said, "I want my mom." And so that's what happened. And I remember to this day, the young man that was the doctor that was there, he even told me, he said, "I normally don't even work this shift, and I don't work in this part of the hospital." But he brought me back, and he said, "Your daughter has type 1 diabetes." And I said, "How do you know that?" He said, "Well, I'm waiting for the blood work." He said, "But I watched her walk, and based on how she's walking, I could tell." And sure enough, she was diagnosed with type 1 diabetes. We were devastated, didn't understand why this had to happen. I immediately went into mother load of, "Lord, if this had to happen, let it be me. Let me be the one, to have this." And so we went through many hours there of them trying to get her settled and get things taken care of. And the nurse that was on duty came to me and said, "We're going to have to move her to a hospital. We can either send her to Wake Med or we can send her to Greenville." And I said, "If you were a mom, what would you do?" And she said, "Well, if my daughter was having heart problems, I would send her to Wake. And if she was having problems with diabetes, I'd send her to Greenville." I said, "Then that's what we're going to do." So they airlifted her to Greenville, and she was there for a week. And during that week, we went through so much learning and trying to figure out what was going on, still confused, still scared, seeing her like that, finding out that she was walking around with a blood sugar of over 800, almost 900 for days. And them telling me, I don't know how much longer she would have lived. So we prayed and we prayed and we asked God to show us the best way to handle this and what we needed to do. And Tori came home, and we did the best we could, and we watched as she was getting smarter and learning how to give herself shots to do the things she needed to do. But I noticed not only had her physical body changed, she had started to change mentally. She was angry, she was confused, and she was very discouraged. She started having panic attacks because she was afraid, what if I'm by myself and my blood sugar drops? What will happen? Will I die? She wouldn't drive a car by herself. Many things that happened, and over time, God began to heal those things. God began to show her, and she began to get stronger and understand and began to get a pump and do things that would help her physically. And I remember her telling me when I said, Tori, I prayed that God would give me that. She said, Mom, you couldn't have handled this. God knew that. You couldn't have given yourself shots. But he knew that I could handle it. And so she's gotten married since that time. She's been married 5 years. He's given her 2 beautiful children that she's gone through pregnancy, when things should have been difficult and tough and all that. God has been right with her. When people have said, you probably don't need to have children, I don't know, what's going to happen. God did what God promised us, and he gave us grandchildren, gave her children, let her be a mom, something she's always wanted to be. And I've heard my daughter stand behind a pulpit and hold a microphone in her hand and say, I went through times of being angry, of times of saying, God, why me? Why did this have to happen? And listen to her as she would explain, I still don't know why. I still don't understand. But I've learned to live with it. I've learned to understand that God is with me, that I can and she does drive a car by herself, that she is more free to do the things that she wants to do. But I don't exactly know why things happen the way they happen. I could stand here and tell you a story of our sister and the things that she went through and why it happened the way that it did. I don't know. I don't know why my daughter was chosen to live this life and have to struggle day to day to make sure she keeps things at a certain level. I don't understand, but I know that God can do anything and that he holds us in the very palm of his hand and that he can take care of whatever situation it is. He can be there. He is there always. Mom sang a song that said, he walks with me and he talks with me and he tells me I am his own. And I believe that and I know that because in the moments that I have cried in the middle of the night and I have begged God to take this away and make things different and heal her, I've had peace in my heart to know that God is taking care of it and he is with her all the time and that he never leaves her. So I'm thankful for that. I'm thankful that my God can do anything. He's God, and I'm thankful for that. My God can do anything, anything, anything. My God can do anything. He made this earth and all its fullness and all time shall bring. My God can do anything. My God can do anything, anything, anything. My God, he can do fullness and all that time shall bring. My God can do anything.
We've heard often about the eye of the storm. There's been songs sung about it. I'm sure there's been sermons preached about it. But I want to talk about something a little different today. I want to talk about the eye in the storm. Someone who is watching you and watching over you in the storm that you face and you go through. My sister sang a song about the fact that there's nothing my God can't do. Together we sang a song that talked about my God can do anything, anything. The message of both those songs, I think I got them reversed, but the message of both of those songs talks about a God who is all-powerful. In fact, Jesus Christ himself told the disciples, he said, with man this shall be impossible, but not with God. For with God all things are possible. All things are possible. So you can imagine how surprised I felt when recently I came across a book that had a title that just caught my attention. It's one of those books that you might buy just for the title. But when I opened it up and began to investigate, I found that it was worth the purchase also. It's called 12 Things God Can't Do. And it's not a gimmick book, you know, it's actually very seriously investigating some things that God can't do. It's by Nick Tucker. And just to give you an idea, without going through all the list of some of the things that make up the chapter headings, some of the things that God can't do according to the book, God can't learn. How can you learn when you already possess all knowledge and are all-knowing? God can't be surprised. We can't shock Him by our behavior or surprise Him by anything that we do. God can't change His mind. God can't change His mind because if He could, He might change His mind about me and about you. No, an all-knowing God knows the beginning from the end from the beginning. Time and space do not limit Him in any way, and therefore, He cannot change His mind. Also, He simply cannot change. The Bible says, I am the Lord God and I change not. How encouraging is that? Because it seems like everywhere we turn, everywhere we look, not only is our world changing, our culture is changing, our family dynamic may be changing, your job situation may be changing like you never imagined. Change has become the norm. In fact, it's become such that to stay somewhere too long and too much of a situation of sameness is viewed as a rut, is viewed as becoming rusty. You need to get out and go. And it's very intimidating at times when we think about change, but God does not change. The Bible says in Hebrews 13:8, Jesus Christ the same yesterday, today, and yes, forevermore. He cannot be lonely. He cannot be lonely. I know that goes against some of the beautiful memorials that we like to come up with when a loved one passes away, how that God was lonely and so He brought them to be with Him. But God is complete in and of Himself, but He is love. That is His very nature. And therefore, He reached out to us and brought us in. But He cannot be lonely. He cannot lack something that requires someone else, or He wouldn't be God. God cannot lie. He is truth. He is truth. In fact, Jesus Christ, when He was walking the earth, announced that He was the way, the truth, and the life. God cannot die. You know, we tell our kids sometimes not to worry about death, and they'll ask, but what about you, Mom? What about you, Dad? Will you still be here? And we may give them assurances based on what we hope, what we believe, what statistically might be accurate, but the bottom line is we don't know. This life is very, very uncertain, but God cannot die. The Creator of all, the one who spoke and it was, the one who created everything out of nothing. That's the God that we serve, a God who cannot die. And so it caught my attention when I came across this book, 12 Things God Cannot Do, and I noticed one chapter or one section of the book with a title that seemed to go against the grain, seemed to take a different position. It's called The God Who Slept. The God Who Slept. Now, Psalm 121 talks about a journey. It's one of the Psalms of Ascent, or songs of ascent, that would be sung by the Jewish people as they would go up to the temple in Jerusalem. And sometimes they were sung antiphonally, and they would sing them back and forth to one another and encourage one another on the journey. And part of that psalm, I've preached it before, talks about the fact that God does not sleep, God does not slumber. He is the God of Israel. He does not sleep, He does not slumber. Verses 3 and 4. A story I read years ago brought this home. One of my favorite ministers, Dr. Lloyd Ogilvie, wrote about it in one of his books. He had been invited to one of his elders' homes for a very special occasion, and they'd asked him to come and pray. And they knew he was going to be late because of his schedule. Some things were conflicting, and so they made a space for him, and they even had a sign made that said, "Reserved
for Dr. Ogilvy. And they put it in the parking space that was reserved for him so he could have quick access to get in and do what he needed to do. And after it was over, after the gathering was over, they had no more need for the sign, and so they said, hey, we'll just give this to you. And so he brought it home. And unfortunately, right after that time, his schedule got even worse, got even more crazy and out of control. And his wife noticed this, and she noticed the toll it was taking on her husband, and she noticed that he was pushing himself hard, and people were demanding so much, and so she worried about him. And it seems like he would hit the bed late and he would rise early, and when he was sleeping, she noticed him tossing and turning. And so what she did was, one night she surprised him. When he got into bed late, after a long day of overscheduling, overbooking, trying to do too much, he got into bed, and when he pulled back the covers, there was that sign, reserved for Dr. Ogilvy, but she had customized it. She had added some words. It said, reserved for Dr. Ogilvy to sleep because God does not sleep. What an encouraging message. We can rest because our God does not slumber. He does not sleep. But then this title comes back to mind, The God Who Slept. Well, it's based on a story in Mark chapter 4, verses 36 through 41. And I want to read that to you. It's found in your YouVersion app, or you can follow along in your Bible. Mark chapter 4, verses 36 through 41. The outline is there also for you in the app. But if you just want to follow along on whatever translation you have, that's fine also. The word of the Lord reads, On that day when evening had come, he said to them, Let us go across to the other side. And leaving the crowd, they took him with them in the boat, just as he was. Jesus was exhausted. He was tired. He was overbooked, overscheduled. Everybody wanted a piece of him. And so they wanted to get him away to rest. It says, and other boats were with him. And notice that, and a great windstorm arose. And the waves were breaking into the boat, so that the boat was already filling. Doesn't sound good, does it? But he was in the stern, Jesus, asleep on the cushion. And they woke him and said to him, Teacher, do you not care that we are perishing? And he awoke and rebuked. He rebuked the wind and said to the sea, you know the words, Peace, be still. Notice this. And the wind ceased, and there was a great calm. And he said to them, Why are you so afraid? Have you so little faith? And they were filled with great fear and said to one another, Who is this then? Now, did you notice that? Let me read that again. They were filled with great fear and said to one another, Who then is this, that even the wind and the sea obey him? Powerful passage of Scripture that's found in Matthew and Mark. We read it from the perspectives of the disciples, and it comes out the same because it's a story of a miraculous power. And it's in the setting, if you read the stories that in context come before it and after it, of showing that he is the God who has power over nature, the God who has power over death, the God who has power over devils or demons, the God who has power over disease. All of these are clustered together to show that he is Lord of all. But what I want you to notice is the impact that this moment had upon them and how it changed them. Let me quote to you from the book, 12 Things God Cannot Do. The disciples in the story more afraid of having Jesus in the boat than they were of having an increasing quantity of the sea in there, because they believed themselves to be in the presence of the living God. 3 words, it seems to me, are a guidepost in this story. It says, first of all, great windstorm. In other words, if you look in the original language, it's mega. There was a powerful mega storm, mega windstorm. But then it talks about the fact that Jesus spoke, Jesus rebuked, Jesus exercised authority over, and a great calm, a mega calm settled over the sea. And you would think, well, that's the contrast, that's the story, the storm, and then the silence, the calm. But no, there's another appearance of that word and another occurrence of that theme. It says that great fear seized the disciples, mega fear, because of what they had seen. Only God can do something like that. Only God has the power over nature. Only God. And yet, here he was in the boat with them. And they were more afraid of having him in the boat than they were afraid of the water getting into the boat and sinking them. Does that make sense? I think in a way it does. You know, sleeping is a very human act. We're vulnerable when we're asleep. Somebody can come along and do something funny to us. They can write on us. They can put shaving cream in our hand and tickle our nose. And, you know, there's all kinds of things you can do when someone is asleep. I remember my baby sister who just sang for us when she was a little girl. I had to, at times, sleep with her because I was the next oldest, and we were so glad that Kathy was going to have a baby sister. And as soon as Connie came along, it seemed like Kathy started dating, and I had to assume that sister-brother role. And so I was many times in bed with her trying to help her get to sleep because she, like a lot of people, you know, felt vulnerable at night and didn't necessarily like the dark. And so she would ask me a list of questions, and I've shared this with you before, but since she's here, I'll share it just to make her uncomfortable and to pick on her a little bit. She would ask me some questions you probably ask yourself, or maybe you've had a child ask you. Are you going to stay with me? Absolutely. Are you going to turn the light off after I go to sleep? No. Will you look my way? Yes. Will you look my way after I go to sleep? Yes. And on it went. She asked the questions. Do you love me? Yes, I love you. She had just a list of questions that unless you checked every one of them off, she wasn't going to be secure and going to sleep. And I love the final question because after I got through with everything, she would say, am I breathing? And I would put my hand over her nose and I would say, yes, you're breathing, and give her peace about that. It's a vulnerable thing, going to sleep. It really is. But it's also a very human thing. I heard about a little boy who wanted to sleep with his mom and dad because he was scared there was a monster in his room and he just felt very frightened. And they said, you go back in there. You go back in there. You need to grow up a little bit and you need to get used to being on your own in your room. And he didn't want to. And he said, I'm scared. And they said, God is in there with you. And he said something profound, even though he probably didn't know it. He said, but I want God with skin on him. We want God with skin on him. We want God that we can touch, that we can feel. And that's really what the story of Christ coming to us, the God-man, Jesus Christ, is all about. I love the Christmas song that's a powerful hymn. Love was when God became a man, locked in time and space without rank or race. Love was God born of Jewish kin, just a carpenter with some fishermen. Love was when Jesus walked in history. Lovingly he brought a new life that's free. Love was God, only he would try to reach and love one such as I. That's the God that we serve. I love this quote from Nick Tucker, and I want to share it with you. He says in that book, 12 things that God cannot do. We shall sleep best at night when we know the God who cannot sleep, but did for us. In other words, it's one thing to be able to say, like Dr. Ogilvy's wife said to him, you can rest because God is awake. You can sleep because God doesn't slumber. But it's also great to know that we can sleep best at night because we know the God who cannot sleep did for us. And I love the fact that he showed his humanity in such a real way. He was sound asleep. They had to wake him. He was sleeping so well the storm didn't bother him. That shows his humanity. But when he stood, he rebuked the storm and with the power of God himself said, peace, be still. And he speaks into our storm, into our life, into our nightmares, into our worst scenarios. And he says, peace, be still. How wonderful it is to know that God who showed his humanity in Christ turned right around and showed his deity as the God-man in those words. What are you facing? My God can do anything. So much so that he came to this earth to let you know and to do it for us through Calvary, through the purchase of our redemption. Our story was written by him. And I want to pray with you right now. And I want you to bow your head and I want you to think about the storm you're facing, the nightmare, the darkness, the fear. Maybe it's great storm and great calm would be wonderful, but right now you're facing great fear, and it's not fear of God, it's fear for your life. My God can do anything. Would you pray with me? Father, we come to you in the name of Jesus. We thank you that you are God and you do not change, that you are God and you do not lie. You are God and you do not forget. You are God and you do not change your mind. All of these wonderful assurances we have based on your very nature, that you are God and you love us, and you always will, because 1 John 4:8 reminds us that you are love. And Lord, as we thank you for these things, we also thank you for the fact that you came to us in the person of your Son, Jesus Christ, who showed his humanity, but also made full presentation of the power of God, so that we know that in our storm, that same Jesus is with us. In our moment of terror, he is saying, peace, be still. Father, right now, I pray that the members of our congregation will hear those words resonating in their soul. Peace, be still. Peace, be still. I pray for that family. I pray for that individual. I pray for the one facing a situation at work, Lord, that's causing great discomfort, mega discomfort, as we talked about. And they wonder, where is God? I pray that they would remember, my God can do anything. Anything. How do we know? He made this earth with all its fullness and all that time shall bring. My God can do anything. Father, we thank you for that assurance. I pray, Lord, right now for the person that just needs that mega calm. Give them the peace that passes understanding, so that they will have a fear, a mega awareness that not only is Christ with me, but Christ, the Son of the living God, Christ, the God-man, Christ, the second person of the Godhead. He is with me. He's in the boat with me. And he can speak peace, and he will speak peace. Be still. In the midst of the bad news, in the midst of the uncertainty, in the midst of the inflation and the price increase, he is my God, and he is my hope, and he is with me. And he is the one writing my life story. And I thank you for that. In Jesus' name, amen and amen. I've asked my sister to come and share a song about what God can do in our life, and maybe the best way to look at what God can do is to look back at what he's done. I talk to you often about journaling and how that it helps to look back and see the hand of God, see the fingerprints of God, the signature of God, and the signs and wonders that take place. And I've asked her to share a song that reminds us that he is the best thing that ever happened to us, because when you look at my life story, he's the one that has made a difference. God bless you.
I've had my share of life's ups and downs. God's been so good to me, and the downs have been few. There again, you could say God has blessed me. There has never been a time in my life he didn't bring me through. He's always brought me through. If anyone should ever write my life story, oh, reason there might be. You'll be there between each line of pain and glory, my pain and glory, 'cause Jesus is the best thing that ever happened. Oh, Jesus is the best thing that ever happened. Yes, Jesus is the best thing that ever happened to me. If anyone should ever write my life story, oh, for whatever reason there might be, you'll be there between each line of pain and glory, my pain and glory, 'cause Jesus is the best thing that ever happened. Oh, Jesus is the best thing that ever happened. Yes, Jesus is the best thing that ever happened. Oh, Jesus is the best thing that ever happened. Jesus is the best thing that ever happened to me. He's the best thing, yeah. Jesus is the best thing. Jesus, yeah, is the best thing. I know that Jesus is the best thing. Jesus is the best thing. Yes, my Jesus is the best thing, 'cause Jesus is the best thing that ever happened to me. Oh, that ever happened to me.